The first essay that you are writing for me this quarter is a narrative essay. So I thought this week we would start to look at the different types of writing, beginning, obviously, with narrative. So hopefully you've only read the first half of chapter 20. You don't have to read the whole thing yet. We will learn about process later. So right now we're just working on narrative. The information in this chapter is pretty short, sweet, and to the point. So I'm just going to kind of review that really quickly. And I didn't assign this last week, so I know that you've already written a draft of your paper, but I didn't want you to be completely overwhelmed in your first week. So I know it's technically a week late, but you still have a whole week to revise before you get your final grade on your paper. And I do expect you to apply the information that you learn in this chapter to your paper this week as you're revising it. All right, so what is narration? Essentially, the best way for you to determine what narration is the use of the pronoun I, as in you. So when you, my student, are writing your paper, every time you use the word I, you are referring to yourself. You're writing a paper about a decision that you have made. So that's narration. It's when you are writing about yourself. Usually you use narration to tell a story, sometimes called an anecdote. And most frequently when you write a narrative paragraph or essay, it is done in chronological order. The book says it's time order, but really I don't understand why they use the term time order. Really, it's just chronological order. It's okay to use a big word. So, the definition is pretty simple. That's really all there is to it. It's an author writing about themselves. Actually, that's not really true, is it? Especially if it's fiction. If it's nonfiction, like your paper is, then you can assume it's the author. But if it is a piece of creative writing, you can't be sure that pronoun I is referring to the author. So I will throw that little caveat in there. But in your case, the I is referring to you. All right, so some key elements that the chapter brings up about narration is to begin with the main point. And you find that main point in your reflections on why you're telling the story. Are you trying to teach someone? Is there a lesson that you're trying to pass on? Is it funny? Are you just looking to entertain and humor? What are you trying to accomplish? And what I would highly recommend is anytime you use narrative, either in a paragraph within a big paper or as a whole paper, have a good reason as to why you're telling that story. Make it very specific. You can use narration as a strategy for arguing to further your point, to say, hey, I've got personal experience here, but it better be good. It better have a purpose, and it better have a strong purpose, and you better fulfill that purpose. So think about why you're telling the story, and from that, you can determine what your main point is. Once you determine what your main point is, you can build a thesis statement or a topic sentence. I don't want you to get confused, because this chapter is talking about writing a narrative paragraph. I'm asking you to write a narrative paper. So you need to have a narrative or a thesis statement driving your narrative, as well as topic sentences for each paragraph. Okay, so in the textbook, it kind of uses topic sentence almost interchangeably with thesis statement, but as I've said in the academic writing video, they're very different things. So again, this chapter is kind of working on a paragraph level. You need to also work on a paper level, because your essay is a whole paper, not just one single paragraph. So if you have any confusion about that, let me know. Okay, so after you've nailed down your thesis statement and your topic sentences based on your main point, you need to organize your details. I think on page 294, the list of details, I guess that's determining your main idea. But that's a really good example of chronologically how things worked with this person's experience of being dumped for the first time. And so if you can start with an outline like that, that's really good, because then you can go back and add the details of each of those elements. And you want those details to be organized. You want them to, again, be chronological. You want them to move from one to the next through transitions. I'll get there in a minute. But make sure that you're organized. You don't want to go back and forth. You don't want to confuse your reader and say, oh yeah, and then 2 years ago this happened, even though the experience you're directly talking about was only a month ago. You need to be really careful on how you organize your story and what you're saying. So be really careful about that. And with the transitions, it helps you organize. So if you look on page 297, it's got highlighted some transitional phrases that show the flow of time. So the first is by the time I was a teenager. The second is the first time that this happened. Then a few years later, for days afterward. Those transitions are moving the chronology forward, but they're also moving your reader through your paragraph. So transitions are extremely important, and it's something I'm really going to stress this quarter. And this is a good first way to start, because chronologically, you know that first, then last are very appropriate transitions as you're moving through time. So it should feel very naturally to you. And every paper you write is going to need transitions in some way. But again, I think chronologically they're more obvious and more natural. So be sure to use them. If you don't, I will very much let you know, because it goes back to that idea that you want to gently guide your reader through your paragraphs and through your whole paper. And transitions are what create that smoothness. If you don't have the transitions, they're jumping from point to point, and it's jolty and ugly, and we don't want that. So make sure you use transitions well, especially since you're working on a chronological event. All right, and then lastly, this part of the chapter talks about using vivid language, and we'll get into description more later. That's a whole separate type of writing, but this is the beginning of it. So you want to be really specific in the words that you choose. You want to use your words to create a sensation in your reader, whether it's visual or taste or whatever. You want to bring in some sensory details, as the book calls them, but you also want the factual details. That's the other type of detail the textbook brings up. So make sure you have a nice balance of that. You really want to draw your reader in with how vivid you are in your descriptions. If you don't describe well, they can't see your experience in their mind. And it's up to you to do that. In your paper, your audience knows nothing about you or your experience. It is up to you to use your vivid language and your vivid descriptions in order to paint that picture for them. And it may take some time, because it's hard to get out of your own head. And you know your own experience perfectly well. It's being able to describe it in a way that somebody who has no idea who you are can see it just as well as you do. So if I can't picture what you're telling me, I'll let you know that too, because I certainly don't know your experiences. So use that vivid language well, and that'll help add meat to your narrative. So hopefully this information, that is the end. Hopefully this information is helpful in terms of revising your narrative essay for this week. If you have any particular questions, let me know. If you want me to look over another draft, let me know. But do the best you can to really describe and transition and organize and do all of these things well in order to make an effective narrative. So again, if you need any help, have any questions, just let me know.